Her party will make no deals which would see the Conservatives return to power. As we've heard her saying, she's going to lock the Tories out of power if she can. Speaking at that launch, she said the SNP wanted to bring an end to austerity and would use its influence to build that alliance against the Trident nuclear submarine programme. Let's go to Westminster and talk to the Defence Secretary, Michael Fallon. A very good afternoon to you, Mr Fallon. Let me put that point that Ed Balls made, that your side are flailing around, desperately pointing the finger at the SNP and Labour to divert attention away from your own failing campaign.
No, what's happened this morning is she has issued the most expensive ransom note in history. Every demand that she's making of Ed Miliband and a possible Labour government, you'll pay for. These aren't modest increases in spending. They're going to mean higher taxes and more borrowing. And the only way to be sure of stopping that is to vote Conservative.
But you can see her point, can't you, that if people in Scotland vote for dozens and dozens of SNP MPs, there's nothing wrong in a democracy for her seeking and pursuing policies which she defines to be in the best interest of Scotland.
That's exactly the danger. She will wrap Ed Miliband round her little finger, and we could have a very dangerous situation where a Labour government propped up by the SNP results in reversing all the progress we've made in the last 5 years, and it means the rest of us have to pay. It means you'll pay more in taxes, borrowing will be higher, and the national debt will be higher.
But, I mean, the natural alliance, it all depends on the arithmetic, doesn't it, after the general election for a Labour Party would be with the Liberal Democrats. And both sides, the SNP and the Labour Party, are ruling out a coalition.
Well, they're ruling out a formal coalition, but it's getting more obvious day by day now that a Labour government could not run the country on its own. This morning she set out SNP demands, as I've said, the most expensive ransom note in history, saying exactly what she will allow Ed Miliband to do and what she won't allow him to do. And the only way to be sure of avoiding that is to vote Conservative.
What about Trident? As Defence Secretary, you've deep concerns about the future of that, based in Scotland, of course.
Yes, I care passionately about our nuclear force and the threat now to scrap our nuclear submarines, which every government since the war has relied on to defend the whole of the United Kingdom, Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. That's a really frightening prospect now. And again, the only way to keep our nuclear deterrent is to vote Conservative.
And you still think Mr Miliband would capitulate on that if he had to deal with the SNP?
Well, I warned a couple of weeks ago that this is a red line for the SNP, and she has emphasised that again this morning. She said she's not prepared to finance the replacement for the Trident submarines. That would dismantle our deterrent at exactly a point when the threats to this country are multiplying, from Russian aggression in Eastern Europe, instability in the Middle East, and the spread of nuclear weapons everywhere. This is no time to be letting down our guard.
And do you still regard Mr Miliband as a backstabber?
Well, I was pointing out what is becoming more obvious day by day, that these two parties, Labour and the SNP, are working on a deal, and she laid out the terms of that deal today, and it's quite clear now she would have Ed Miliband round her little finger.
Yeah, but do you still think there's a relationship between Ed Miliband standing against his brother for the Labour leadership 5 years ago and his desire to get rid of Trident?
Well, the issue now is, can we trust a partnership between Labour and the SNP, led by Ed Miliband? Can we trust that kind of partnership to be sure of our national defence? And she has said, again, very clearly this morning, that she is prepared to get rid of our nuclear submarines. That is the uncertainty that would result if you end up with this grisly backstairs deal between Labour and the SNP. You'll pay more, there'll be more borrowing, and you'll have weaker defence as well.
But I mean, there's uncertainty about defence from the Conservative side, leaving out the SNP. We still haven't heard you say unequivocally that you'll spend 2% of GDP on the defence budget.
Oh, we've made stronger and more specific commitments than that. We've said we will replace all 4 of the nuclear submarines in the 2020s.
You haven't said 2%, though.
Well, we've also committed to no further cuts in the armed forces, and we've committed to increase by 1% each year the equipment budget under which we're now building new aircraft carriers and hunter-killer submarines and investing in new armoured vehicles from the army. So defence is secure under a Conservative government.
But does it amount to 2% of GDP, Secretary of State?
We are already spending 2% of GDP. We're well ahead of the other members of NATO in that.
And will continue to do so.
As to what a SNP Labour government, Ed Miliband, propped up by the SNP, is where that would leave you. Because again today, she said she would absolutely rule out continuing our nuclear deterrent. That is the danger that faces this country.
Secretary of State, thank you very much indeed. Defence Secretary Michael Fallon there. Now, a 14-year-old boy from